Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Discourse. This week, we're talking about the Wes Craven, Kevin Williamson film Scream, a 1996 slasher classic. The one that I think the movie that defined horror in the 1990s, certainly for slasher films, revitalized the subgenre and would go on to make many other entries in the franchise, of course, spawned many entries in the franchise, and also led to numerous knockoffs throughout the decade. And I want to go to each and every single person that we have here and ask her thoughts about the movie and the characters. But let me go ahead and first say hello to Deadpool, Emily, Osnick, Chris Ayers, Thunder Lee, Kazfay, and M. Xavier. I hope you guys are doing very well today. But I'll go ahead and first start and just say that I'm a very big fan of this movie. I have a huge appreciation for it. It's not only probably my favorite horror film of the 90s, one of my favorite slasher films, if not my favorite slasher film of all time, but also my favorite Wes Craven movie. And it did the thing that I think the subgenre needed, was kind of take the piss out of itself, which is to dissect all the tropes that are so often attributed to a lot of horror films, and in particular the slasher subgenre, to go over the rules, to try to defy the rules. And even though if you may know the rules and you defy them constantly, you may end up winding up dead anyway. And so I love that it circumvented a lot of people's expectations and did something new. And just being relatively clever and giving us characters that we actually like and want to be around. One of my biggest criticisms of a lot of slasher films or horror films in general, the bad ones, is that you're always surrounded by characters you dislike. And you actually end up cheering for the slasher throughout the movie. And that's what happened, I think, with a lot of the big franchises during the 70s and 80s, whether it be Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street or any of the other ones, Friday the 13th, where you just don't give a shit about these characters and the slashers become heroic icons, which is not what they should be. They're monsters. And I like that Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson realized that, and they made a film and a film series that defied all those things and examined it in a new way and made it fresh for audiences. And audiences clearly responded well to that, along with most critics, I would say. Some of these films did get a lot of pushback for the depictions of violence and how tongue-in-cheek they were, but I appreciate them, and I'm a big fan of this movie. I want to go to each person down the line, kind of your general thoughts when you first saw it, and how your opinion has kind of changed over time, if it has changed over time. But I originally saw this movie in the early 2000s, so I didn't see this in theater or anything like that. A lot of these films have already were out by the time I watched them, but always had a big appreciation for Scream 1 and, of course, 2. Not so much 3, but those are the films that I've seen. But we'll go ahead and we'll start with M. Xavier. How did you first see Scream, and what are your general thoughts on the movie?
Yeah, sure. So the first time I saw this movie, I don't really remember. I know I didn't see it in theaters. I didn't see it till afterwards. But but I think like most people, I saw a scary movie, and so a lot of the
Yes.
things that happened in the movie was kind of like already like somewhat kind of spoiled for me, because I was like, oh, this person's gonna die, this person's gonna die, and then but I thought that, but after watching Scream, I thought they did somewhat a pretty good job like mimicking what happens in the movie.
Sure.
But to speak on Scream in particular, because I rewatched it today, I thought it was a good movie. I like you were saying how we like I don't think for myself I tended to care about the characters. I thought that a lot of the characters in this movie were like you like to say is disposable meat. I didn't besides maybe the main character,
Sydney.
Sydney. Thank you, Sydney. I liked her and I cared about her, and actually I really cared about her story. This is your mom. You're supposed to love her, and then come to
He's a
find out that
whore.
this person that you love is actually like has done bad things. So
Yeah.
so yeah, I really like that aspect of it. But yeah, overall, I thought the movie was just it was good. It was okay.
Okay, no, it's good. No, I'm actually glad. No, listen, I was talking about this last week. Maybe it was the week before. Talking about movies, how we've been pretty much in all agreement on them. And so, if you guys don't like this movie, then please voice your opinions. If you don't like the characters, voice your opinions. I'm just telling you how I feel, my opinion. So, no, please go into it. Thank you. No, you're not a big fan of a lot of the character exception of maybe Sydney Prescott and her story. So that's cool. No, I like that. I like that. Kaz, what about yourself? How did you first see this movie, and have your thoughts changed on it since then?
Well, the funny thing is, my introduction to this franchise is when I was in middle school and I saw Scream 3 with some friends, and like I could tell that it was a part of something much bigger, and I could tell that the first two movies were probably better. So, like, and I
Yeah.
still liked Scream 3, so I'm like, okay, I definitely want to see this if the first two are even better than that. So once I got to high school and my parents were a bit more lax on that, that's when I saw it. And I think that's what really got me into both horror comedies and just real meta movies that subvert your expectations and poke fun at themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I rewatched it today. I would say it still holds up and I still really love it. The main thing about my opinion that's changed is that the deeper themes of it are more evident to me. The way it addresses misogyny, and also certain characters have become less likable over the years. Like, even if Billy and Stu hadn't turned out to be the killers, it would have been really obvious that they're just toxic dudes that you need to stay away from.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Billy's just creepy. Like he's that sexy creepy. It's like when he looks at you, it's like, oh, he's giving you that smoldering look. But at the same time, he's just not fucking blinking, and it's weird. And Stu
Yeah.
is just obnoxious. Like he wants to be like Billy, but he's just not. He's like I look at him as like a Billy wannabe. And maybe that's why he's obviously so attracted to Billy in the film and wants to is always at his beck and call, is always and is his follower. But no, I'm glad that I'm glad you observed that. That's cool. Thunder Lee, Jacob, what about you, sir? How did you first see this movie, and what are your thoughts on it? And if they changed over time?
I first saw this movie back in 2012. This was like right when I first got into watching horror movies and started loving them. I think AMC was showing this for their Halloween
Right.
nights, and w- watching the film, the first like 20 minutes of it, that's what hooked me. That's what like, oh snap, this movie is not like playing around.
Yeah.
It kind of has that like nightmare vibe with the first like character,
Mm-hmm.
where
Mm-hmm.
you see her but she dies halfway through the movie. This one's like, oh yeah, you see the first character, no, she's not the main character.
Sure.
And that's what solidified to me how much I knew I was gonna enjoy the movie. That also solidified the fact that Drew Barrymore is a fantastic actress.
Oh yeah, no, she's great. Even back in the day, she was America's sweetheart.
Yeah, and like I love watching this film. I watch it several times a year. So when I watch it over and over again, I always pick up new things like, oh, like Billy and Stu, they, even though they're into the whole thing, like they make things obvious. Cindy is kind of like the most badass person.
Sure.
Gail is the chick that everybody lusts over because she's a TV personality. Dewey is the goofy one who he's the goofy character,
Yeah.
but he knows what he's doing, especially like with the chemistry he has with Gail.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's some of my favorite parts because you could tell like Gail really likes him, but she's trying to hide it at the same time. But the movie is fantastic. It's literally one of my favorite Wes Craven, Kevin Williams,
Williamson. Yeah.
Williamson films. I almost called Wes Craven Wes Carpenter right now.
There you go. Just like Rose McGowan's character. No, I love that line in the film. It's like this is some kind of Wes Carpenter movie.
Yeah.
And honestly, what I also appreciate about this film, we'll get into it later on, but because yes, it's a dissection of it's a critique on horror slasher films throughout the 70s and 80s, and John Carpenter obviously played a major role in defining the tropes of that particular subgenre, much like Wes Craven did in Nightmare. And I like that he pays a lot of respect to John Carpenter in this movie. I mean, Halloween has a huge function in the last act of the film. Inspires Randy to go on about the rules, the 3 major rules, of course. About don't have sex, don't drink and do drugs, and never say "I'll be right back." Course, and I love the how he uses the score in the movie as well, which I think is really cool.
Halloween is throughout the whole movie. Like in the beginning, you can see the VHS of Halloween sitting in the kitchen. You can hear the score for Halloween, and there's parts of the film that is playing. So
exactly,
that's awesome.
So yeah, it's cool that he paid homage and a lot of respect to John Carpenter. That's always an easy way to get in my good graces because I'm such a fan. Chris Ayers, what about yourself, sir? How did you first see this movie, and how's your opinion changed over time?
I saw this movie about a year and a half before the 4th one came out, so I would have been 12 or 13 years old, and it's funny, M. Xavier mentioned watching Scary Movie before Scream, so that almost ruined Scream for him, and that was kind of the same experience for me. Like, I watched Scary Movie first, I rented some Blockbuster, because that's how I snuck R-rated movies past my parents, and I thought, oh, cool, this is its own, unique story that's completely original, I'm loving this, and then later on I watched Scream, and I was like, oh no, they basically just did this movie again, except with fart jokes and slapstick. But yeah, I watched Scream around that same time, and that was around the time I was starting to get more into scary movies. That was one of the first ones I really got into, along with Evil Dead. And I really dug it. Like, I loved all the characters, especially Sydney, who was probably my first horror movie heroine crush.
Sure.
And yeah, the kills are really cool, even though my one problem with the movie is that it is so blindingly obvious who the killers are, like you guys mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
But that's you. Honestly, I'm one of those guys who, if I can predict a twist, it still doesn't really ruin the movie for me unless there's just nothing else to carry me through. And thankfully here, there's a lot of stuff to carry me through. And I watched the other ones not long afterwards, and yeah, even though 3's the weakest, it's pretty rough. It's still probably my favorite ongoing horror franchise, and I'm hopeful that this new one can keep up that streak.
I'm very interested in seeing obviously I got to see the 4th one before the new one comes out, but I really love 1 and I really love 2 because 2 is I'm having done the reviews for them very recently. It's I don't know which one's the superior one. I kind of go back and forth. I like this one. I like that, and the sequel does. I mean, everything just as good, and still examining those tropes, has a good twist in it and everything.
I personally prefer.
Go ahead.
Oh, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and even though they had to actually change things for that sequel, because they leaked out, it was a very secretive project, it still had a great ending. I think even a better one than what they originally planned. It's just those 2. The 3rd one, like you said, I'm just not a fan. I haven't seen the 4th one, but no, what you want to say?
I was gonna say, of the first 2, I personally prefer the first one, but I would say the second one is almost as good, and I would personally argue necessary. I can get into why a little bit later when we get into a certain character.
Sure. No, of course, absolutely. Austin, what about yourself, sir? How did you first see this, and how's your opinion changed about it over time?
So I'm a bit weirder with this. I never really liked horror movies growing up. I was too much of a puss for them. But as a kid, I always saw people dress up in the Ghostface costume. I seen it on the Scary Movie poster. And then last year when you did your original Scream review,
right? Yeah.
I really got into the movie and I watched a lot of what's his name, Zach Cherry videos on it, and it really shows how much of a detailed and just how precise and everything is so important in this movie, and it's kind of made me love it. The 1 and 2, and I kind of watched them all last year, and I rewatched 1 today, and I'm probably actually going to watch Scream 2 later tonight. But
nice,
man, these movies are just so good. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just
Keep going. Sorry.
No, it's okay. There's just like so many like metal. I made some notes. Little details that build upon. Like in I think Sydney has a line. It's like, yeah, if they made this a movie, I would be played by Tori Spelling, which actually happens in 2.
Mhm.
There's like the when you first meet Skeeter, the song playing is "Don't Fear the more cowbell song."
Right. Yeah.
Like there's a cameo from Linda Blair in the background.
It's just one of the reporters. That's right.
It's just like it's. I mean, because I actually rewatched Halloween recently, and it's like there is something about. I think it's something where it isn't just like a suit. It isn't like a Freddy Krueger with knives. Like this, someone could do this. There is something about that. There is something about just a guy with a knife, and he's coming after you.
It works on 2 different levels for me. I'm glad you brought that out. Where because Ghostface is very grounded, and anyone could be Ghostface, which I actually like that because usually in horror franchises you're always bringing back the same killer, and you always have to figure out like an explanation. Sometimes you just give up, and he's like he's immortal, he's a zombie, whether it be Michael Myers or Jason Voorhees, or with Freddy, he's like, well, he's a nightmare monster, so of course he can come back, or he's supernatural. But with Ghostface, they can't do that. And I like that it's always somewhere different each time. And I think that's what makes it believable. But also, you're right about like the humor, because it's so over the top, and like Ghostface is not always competent. It's like, yeah, he has all these schemes and things. But I like that, like even this movie, I mean, he gets his ass kicked a lot. He's falling over, he's tripping over himself, he's getting like beer thrown at him, and he's like going down. I kind of like that. I like that he has that
beer bottle.
Yes, exactly. And he has that flailing run where his arms are just always like going up and down like really fast. But I like that. He's just kind of like a goof. And I think that's just. But I think you need that for a horror franchise like this. It's not always so serious. Like bad things are happening, serious things are happening, but you need a little comedy. I think that's what makes it a little more palpable. Mm-hmm. So I'm right there with you. Emily, what about yourself? How did you first see this, and what were your opinions on it? How has your opinions changed, I should say?
I didn't see Scream until I was 8. I saw a Scary Movie first at 6, so It was kind of ruined for me a little bit by the time I saw it. My mother hates horror movies. My grandmother tortured her with that shit when she was a little girl, so I didn't really see a whole lot of horror movies when I was super young. I was like it was about like 10 when I really started getting into horror movies.
Yeah.
So I don't have the same, would say, affection for it like other people do. Like, for example, I don't know if it's controversy, I always thought Sydney was a bit of a dumbass. I was like the whole
that's fine.
Like Billy, the whole fucking creepy dude thing. I'm just like, it's just weird. I used to date a guy who was similar to Billy in high school, kind of whatnot. He was kind of creepy, but at the same time, he was really good at video games. I think that was the only reason why I hung around him. But but yeah, he's just kind of creepy. Just gave off the weird vibes. I always thought that Stu kind of wanted to, I don't know, fuck Billy or something, or maybe he just harbored more than friendly feelings for him. Same with Randy. It was very obvious that he liked Sydney.
Yes.
Randy, I have to say Randy is my favorite character out of the first movie. Like the rules and whatnot. I honestly thought he was going to get it at the end the first time I saw it. I was like, oh, the guy who knows everything about horror movies, you won't be around for a sequel.
Yeah, keep going. Go ahead.
I was surprised how they killed him off in 2. Honestly, I wasn't expecting that. I thought he would go out in a more dignified way instead of like a bitch in a van getting stabbed to death. But yeah, it's like Scream really. It's crazy how much it's the self-aware jokes of it and whatnot, and all the parallels between that and Scary Movie. I'm trying not to get things with Scary Movie mixed up here. I was about to start describing something with Shorty. That didn't happen in Scary Movie. That happened in Scary Movie. So.
No, I think that's cool. I'm actually glad you brought up like how just creepy, obviously, Billy is, because he is creepy.
He's so freaking creepy. Like, I did give away that I figured it out. Like, first time I watched it, I was like, he's definitely a killer. I don't care what anybody says. He's definitely a killer. That creepy eye, just that dead. Ugh. I can't even look at the.
He has a dead stare. He doesn't blink at all.
Like he did that really well. I was like, whoever this dude is, like, he did it really well.
Skeet Ulrich, yeah. I always like to call him. I'm kind of mean about it. I call him Discount Johnny Depp. But they literally said when they casted him, he had a Johnny Depp look to him, which is what would be perfect. Because yes, he is creepy in the movie, but at the same time, like so often, like, oh well, he can get away with it because he's good looking. You know, it was that kind of that.
I was like, he's creepy. He's a bad guy. Like, no, it's just like, I don't care how good looking you are. You're the bad guy.
And there's no doubt that in my mind, especially rewatching again so recently, how Matthew Lillard's character of Stu, he's obviously in love with Billy. He's attracted to him. I mean, you can even tell, and we'll get more in the characters in a bit because I want to really dive in. But like he's constantly touching him. He's a very physical character, and he's like, if you look at the end scene when they're in the kitchen. Like how he's holding his hands like over him. He has his face against his head.
He's trying to hide it.
Yeah. No, I think that's funny. And Randy is kind of like the MVP of the first and second film because he predicts who all the killers are. He predicts them all in this movie, and he also predicts all the killers in 2. And even in it was so funny, but we'll do Scream 2 someday. But not only does he predict all the killers in the canon version of Scream 2, but he also predicts all the killers that were in the original version of Scream 2. So he covers both of his base, what I think is very funny. So I'm glad you brought that up. No, Randy's great. He is a fan favorite, and I think for a lot of people, when they killed him, it was like, oh. But at the same time, that went against our expectations because everyone loves that character and thinks he's going to be around forever. In that case, he wasn't, which is probably what makes his death so effective for people. And again, real props to Jamie Kennedy. You know, maybe I'm not the biggest fan of his stand-up, but he really nailed this role. Yeah, I'm right there. It's
not for everybody,
but he does a good job with this character, and
yes, he does.
I like him. He's charming. Deadpool, what about yourself? How did you first see this movie, and what are your general thoughts on it? Your opinions changed on it?
Well, I'm kind of like most of you guys, where I didn't see until much later,
and
I saw Scary Movie first.
Funny, I love that.
But like I saw that much later back. So when I got to see, when I finally sat down to actually watch all Scream, at least it was far enough away from when I saw a Scary Movie to kind of at least not like forget parts of it.
Sure.
But I think probably the one thing that I appreciate about the Scary Movie series, which hasn't really been brought up that much, is that it's not only a slasher movie, but there's also a mystery element to it, which I think like a lot of the other slasher movies don't do. Because you don't know who the killer is. I mean, like in Friday the 13th or in Halloween or in Nightmare on Elm Street, you know who the killer is the whole time.
Yep. That's a very good point. And that's why, and I think that's what also keeps the films fresh for people. It's like, even if maybe if you've grown a little bit tired of Scream, and maybe it's formula, maybe it's dissection of these kind of tropes. What is always interesting is that, well, there's always going to be a new Ghostface, which is what I like. Or maybe, who knows? Maybe they'll have a returning Ghostface. I'm still saying Stu might come back in 5, and they've never confirmed that he's dead.
That he died? They never actually did?
Yeah, no, they never confirmed it. They never did. Now, and for those that don't know, in the original Scream 3, that was what they were going to do. They were going to bring back Stu, and what his plan was, he was going to be training other Ghostfaces. And I thought, oh, that's fucking awesome. But they didn't do that because of Columbine at the time, for whatever reason. Ooh. And they scrapped that, and they did the weird, fucked up version, which I don't like.
I wish they went with the Stu thing.
Like that would have been better.
Foley being her hateful half brother and blah blah blah. It's like, why?
That was death. That just felt cartoonish. And I think I think that's what the Ready or Not guys are going to do. They're going to honor Wes Craven's original, Ken Williamson and Wes Craven's original idea for Scream 3, and they're going to make that movie. because as I said before, we're getting off in the weeds because we're not talking about the original Scream, but I will say, like, in the trailer, they're talking about how we've been brought back here for a reason, and they're going back to Stu's house. I'm like, there's something to that. And I think it would be fucking great if they brought back Matthew Lillard. He's been alive for all these years, but he's all fucked up because a TV fell on his head. He got hit by a phone.
It's funny because in every interview that he's been doing lately, he's like, I'm telling you, Stu's not dead. Like,
yeah, there you go.
He's saying it.
He's already put it out there. So
he's not even trying to hide it very well.
Yeah, because I think that was the plan. Was that he was set to come back, which is it was a shame they didn't do that.
And just based on Ready or Not, I think we're gonna get a good like dark comedy at least.
Oh yeah, no, I when they were announced, obviously Wes Craven, he had passed away in 2015, and he had plans to do a Scream 5 and a Scream 6, but because of his illness, before that, he was never able to execute those plans, sadly. And
actually, he passed away during the MTV series, which is like. The MTV series is what it is, not really that good, but he oversaw that production too, and there is a lot of Wes Craven-esque moments in that show.
I never seen the series, so I've heard very negative things about it.
You can skip it. You can especially skip season 3. That's just
so they did multiple seasons of it. Okay,
there was promise.
Yeah,
they messed it up.
Promise. Gotcha. But I knew that he was planning to do. He had ideas for Scream, along with Ken Williams, to do Scream 5 and 6. But I'm hoping of these the Ready or Not guys. Like I really enjoyed that movie. That was one of my favorite movies the year it came out. I guess it was like 2019 or 2020 or something. And I really dug it. And so like, having those guys come in and they're going to have that sense of humor, which is what Scream definitely needs. I think that's a very important component. I think for not only slashers in general, but when it comes to revitalizing slasher franchises. And so Scream in a way, I think maybe requires a little bit of a revitalization. So that's going to be very interesting.
I feel like Scream always had the comedic style, especially in the first movie.
No, definitely. Oh, no, across the board. I imagine it has the same thing in the fourth film as well. But I just haven't seen it.
Like the scene. Oh, sorry.
No,
I was thinking of the scene where Randy and Billy were running up to the door, and Sydney's like, fuck both of you, and just closes them out. I laughed my ass off at that. I was like, yeah!
I love that so much.
Can't trust them. Can't trust either of them. And at that point in the movie, you have no idea who it is. You know, and you don't initially suspect Stu when you first see it because, well, his girlfriend just died, you know, beforehand. So I like that. So I like that. You're just so unsure.
His fake crying was really over the top in that scene, though.
Really the thing Matthew Lillard does with his, the mouth thing and the kind of face he makes.
He does that a lot in the movie. He does. He has like I've noticed he has a certain He does. Yes, he does the fake crying, but he also sticks out his tongue a lot in the film. Like like he does that. Like I'm gonna say at least a dozen times. Well, he's a dozen times, and he's even talked about his performance. And he says, "Yeah, I was really over exaggerated." Like he's commented on Sense, which I think is very funny. But speaking of, we're talking about the characters right now, and I just want to go down like prime, and we could always bring up some of the tertiary characters too, because there's a lot of characters in this movie. But the first one I want to start with is Drew Barrymore's Casey. Now, for people that might be unaware, she was initially cast as Sidney Prescott, and that was the big reason. I mean, again, kind of turning the clocks back, she was America's sweetheart. She was one of the most popular actresses during the 90s. When a Drew Barry project was getting off the ground, people wanted to be involved. And Wes Craven initially passed on Scream. He's like, I don't want to do this again. But one of the several big reasons what got him back involved was the fact that Drew Barrymore was interested in the project and was going to play the lead character. So he got on board. But then before they were going to start principal photography, she famously said that she doesn't want to do the main role. She instead wants to play the first girl that dies in the film, Casey, who dies in the first 10 minutes. And people were initially like, how's that going to work? But in hindsight, Drew Barrymore made one of the best decisions for that movie because she was the biggest star in it. Yes, people had knew some of these other actors. I know that Ned Campbell had She had done The Craft, and I think she was on a TV show along with Skeet Ulrich, a number of other these people. So they're already like known.
Party of Five was the show she was on.
Party of Five, thank you. And I know that Jamie Kennedy was doing stand-up, and he was already appearing in movies beforehand. I think he did Romeo and Juliet before he did this film.
He actually auditioned with like the hot pink hair because he had his hair dyed. He was shooting Romeo and Juliet
right?
at the time. And
That's funny.
yeah, he went and auditioned with the hot pink hair, and he got the role. I was like, that's freaking cool. He talks about it on his YouTube channel. I should post a link for that if you're interested.
He went into that, and everybody was like, "Your hair's pink." Like they were surprised about it.
That's great. But it's incredible because she was the best known person in that movie, and she dies in the first 10 minutes, and very graphic, horrific.
Disemboweled, doesn't she?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just in a very graphic, horrific sequence, and I think that's what really set the cadence for the movie, and what really made people like, oh shit, this is not a usual horror film that I'm used to. Usually, the biggest star is gonna be the one that's gonna live, at least for the majority of it, or at least to the very end. So yeah, I mean, I really liked her performance. I mean, she sold that role of Casey, from her crying to the death of her boyfriend. But kind of general thoughts. This is from anyone right here on Casey as a character, as brief as her role was. What did you think of it? Did it work for you? Did it not work for you? Were you disappointed that she was in more of the movie? Would you have liked to have seen her as Sidney Prescott? I'm curious.
Mm-hmm.
I like the whole fake out with the movie poster thing, because isn't she like right in the middle of the whole cast and the whole Scream thing or whatever? So they kind of trick you with that thing. Oh, she's the final girl. She's like right up in front and center on the front here. Like, no, we are not doing that in this movie.
It was the main marketing ploy for the movie. Like,
it's her face on the poster.
Yeah, it's literally her face on the poster. I love it. I love her role in this movie, mostly because it's set to shock people.
Yes.
So like the part where she has to do like the trivia, and she
likes scary movies. Yeah.
And she messes up by saying that the killer in the first Friday the 13th movie was Jason, when it was Mrs. Voorhees.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that because I'd never seen the first movie until probably like a couple years later. And now I'm like, oh damn. She probably never saw the original first movie. That's because everybody thinks Jason is
like the hockey mask and everything.
Yeah. Like Jason is the face of Friday the 13th, but he was never in the original until the end.
Yeah,
so like so that what's ultimately like kills her boyfriend, where I'm like, you lying about the fact that you don't have a boyfriend, and then all of a sudden you do. Like, it's hilarious.
I mean, it was believable. Teenage girls are stupid, and they panic, and when you're scared shitless, you're not going to think straight. So I thought it was believable.
Yeah. What worked for me is she wasn't. I didn't think she was even stupid. It was just, I mean, it was a no-win scenario, especially because when you find out at the end of the film, it's like Stu famously says, if you get it right, you die. If you get it wrong, you die. In the end, you're going to die, Sydney. And so I was like, okay. So, I mean, she never had a chance.
Yeah. Sorry.
But I was going to say, like, I do love the fact that they have that, again, because you never hear another horror films mentioning, unless it's like a weird crossover or something. But you never hear them talking about, like, when you think of like a big horror film, them talking about like other horror movie franchises in that way and poking fun at them. Like, I love that whole line about how she's asking Ghostface like what his favorite horror movie is, and I think eventually she says like Nightmare. He's like, the one with the guy with the knives for fingers, and she's like, oh, Nightmare on Elm Street, and he goes, you a fan of those movies? He's like, well, I like the first one, but the rest of them suck, which is very Wes Craven. Because he made the original one, he directed it, did a draft of Dream Warriors, and then of course he famously did New Nightmare. But that also showed his resentment towards the other entries of the franchise, which he was not involved in. But it's stuff like that, and I think Drew Barrymore sells that dialogue really well. Kevin Williams' dialogue extremely well.
So I'm gonna say that about that scene is when I went to see the 25th anniversary screening, they had showed the behind the scenes featurette of Scream, and there's a moment where Wes Craven was talking about that specific line where, oh, the first one was great, but all of them was terrible. He didn't know that was in the script until she said it.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
But
I was gonna mention that I do really like Casey. I don't think I personally needed to see more of her. Not because she was like bad or like I thought she was annoying or anything. I just was like, oh, okay, that's the end of her story. But
Yeah.
But just that whole opening I thought was just really good. I mean, I felt like that could have been like a marketing for the movie. Like it could have just been like, you know, I don't know, Wes Craven short film titled whatever, and then then tell people like this is something because I just thought it was so like intriguing and I was on the edge of my seat and also one thing I also didn't realize is like how bloody this movie was because like when they showed like her boyfriend with his guts open I was like
Yeah.
oh shit they actually showed that so but yeah really liked Casey and really liked the opening of the movie.
It feels like the modern day version of Psycho, where you have the biggest star and you kill her off as early as you can.
Yeah.
No,
Which is funny because they reference Jamie Lee Curtis, and that's her mom in Psycho.
That's right. That's right. No, great comparison, Osnick. Yeah, no, I just it's just and I'm glad you brought up the brutal deaths. It's funny because originally when they had submitted this film to the MPAA, it got an NC-17 rating. And they actually had to edit out a lot of the violence in the movie. Funny enough, and it really frustrated Wes Craven. And one of the biggest sequences was the one with Steve. Like it was supposed to go on for longer, where you see like more of his intestines and guts and meat fall out of his body. So they have to cut around that. And I think some of the other kills.
You can actually find that deleted footage on YouTube. Like,
nice.
Look up Scream unrated, and you should be able to find it pretty quick.
There you go. Check out all those deleted scenes. Any other kind of last minute thoughts on the Casey character, Drew Barrymore's performance, before we move on to the rest of the cast, who's in the majority of the film?
I'd say, for me personally, I think the best part about her performance was towards the end of the scene, because it's just mostly her. Like, it was so believably like her performance was so believable with the crying and stuff. It's like. And
croaking.
Yeah. And like she was right there to get the attention of her parents. And it was that really still just kind of creeps me out. Like you could be
the
right
hopelessness
there.
Of the situation.
Yeah, the hopelessness. That's
so
what scared
close.
me the most.
So close. And I realized like why she sounds that way. He was choking her beforehand. So he probably like fucked up her larynx or vocal cords or something. Yeah, her windpipe, her esophagus. So that's probably the reason why she goes like, oh, why you got going? It's like, no, I get it. I understand. Well, I was like, all right, fair enough, Wes Craven. What? Sorry, Deadpool, what'd you say?
He also stabbed her in the lungs, so her lung collapsed.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
He was stabbing her all over her torso. That's a good point. But yeah, no, I think Drew Barrymore's performance is good. As brief as her performance is, as brief as her role is in the movie, it is one of the most appealing aspects about it. It showcases that this is not an ordinary slasher film, that it's circumventing, defying those common tropes and expectations. And probably one of those iconic horror slasher sequences of all time. But we can go ahead and move on to the rest of the cast, the principal cast that is. And I think it's best to start with Ned Campbell as Sidney Prescott. I think she's a really talented actress. She's an excellent final girl. She is. She becomes as the series goes on, she becomes even more competent and more badass, more strong. I mean, sadly, more traumatized as well, based on all of her experiences that she's gone through. And she's also just a fucking cutie patootie. She got them big old twofers. She got those two big teeth. And there's some that's kind of adorable about her. I like her. I like her a lot. And she's spunky. And she's sensitive. She's just a really well-rounded person. But she's dealing with this trauma in her life, even before the events of Scream, the trauma with her, as they call in the movie, her slut of a mother, and everything like that, and her PG-13 rated relationship with Billy. And I think she sells that very well. You know, if Drew Barrymore had played Sidney Prescott, we would have never been introduced to Ned Campbell, and we would never had her as a iconic female heroine in a horror movie. So her performance in general, I mean, we spend most of the time with her in the movie, and I think it's great. But general thoughts on Ned Campbell as Sidney?
She's fantastic, and I am curious to see how Drew Barrymore would have played it, and I'm sure she would have done a really good job because she's a really good actress.
Yes.
But I don't know. There's something about Ned Campbell. She has this sort of charisma that she carries with herself that makes her feel like a more unique horror movie heroine. Like, I think if Drew Barrymore had played it, it would have felt a little more typical, but Ned Campbell is able to bring something to it that makes the character stand out more, along with just how well written in general the character is.
Agreed. Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Cass. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say, like, I think Neve Campbell, like, there's something about her vibe, like, it's a bit darker and a bit more grounded, and I just think she does such an amazing job of conveying the trauma that Sydney has to carry with her.
What I also like about the character, it's that just I hate to use the word darkness, but she's a little more. There's definitely a little bit of Laurie Strode in her. I think we can see that where she's very studious, she's smart at the same time, and I like that she's competent. Like a lot of the characters in this movie are actually surprisingly competent. Even the goofy, the quote unquote goofy ones that we get, like Randy or Deputy Dewey. But there is something about her that I think she's just a well-rounded person. And she doesn't feel two-dimensional. Like there's more to her than just being, I'm the hero of the movie and I will fight at every opportunity. It's like, no, there's more to her, and I like that about her, which I think makes her such an enjoyable protagonist to follow around and be with. Like even the scene, like I was watching this a couple days ago, I was doing my commentary. There's that whole scene when she is called by Ghostface for the first time, and she thinks it's Randy on the phone, and how she's like joking with him, and so she's acting very differently compared to Casey, who we met earlier. And even when she realizes it's not Randy, and she goes outside, she's like, "You see me? I'm right out here. What are you gonna do? What am I doing? Huh? What am I doing?" She's picking her nose. Like there's something different about her, and I like that. A rigidness, and I really like that. Any other thoughts on Sydney as a character?
I do have one thought.
Go ahead, Deadpool.
So basically, being in a relationship or being friends with her is pretty much a death sentence in this movie. I mean, like, she's
your friend or boyfriend.
Yeah, she's the Grim Reaper because just seems to fall with her, like everywhere. Like,
unless you're Dewey or Gail, if you're friends with her, you're toast.
That's true.
Yeah, if you want to fuck her, no, you're gonna die.
I mean, I'm surprised. I'm surprised in the newest movie she isn't just living out in a cabin in the middle of Montana, just like staying away from everyone else.
That's because she already did it in the third movie.
Yeah,
it didn't work.
Yeah,
she got drawn back into the situation.
The way they pulled her back in was bullshit, but that's a story for another time.
We'll talk about Scream 3 someday. We'll get into more details. But you're right. No, you're right, Deadpool. It's like you realize, like, goddamn. But it also shows how sad her life is. Like in Scream 1, obviously her boyfriend's a serial killer, and her friends are either dead or also serial killers. And then by the time we get to 2, she loses everybody. It's like, oh my God. Like she just, her every other movie, every movie for her, it's a tragedy. She's always losing something. And do not be her friend. Do not be her fucking boyfriend, because you'll either be a murderer or you'll be murdered. So, great point to bring up.
It's kind of funny because as more the movies go on, the more she's like, I'm so over this. I'm really tired of this. Can something new happen?
I saw in the trailer, like one of my favorite lines is when Dewey calls her, Sad Dad Dewey, as I call him, because it looks like he's divorced from Gail at this point. Oh, yeah. But he's like, it's happening again. And do you need a gun? She's like, I'm Sidney Prescott. I always have a gun. And so I'm like, yeah, there it is. That's what, because she's lived her life for the past 25 years like this. Austin, did you want to say something?
A little bit. I think she is a really good final girl. I one of my favorite parts is she wears the costume to when she was fighting when
Billy.
she stabs Billy.
At the umbrella.
And even I think she starts to realize how creepy Billy is throughout the movie, especially in that like hallway scene.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and one other thing, even kind of watching it today, I always thought of her as very much a popular girl. She is not. She gets made fun of in the bathroom by those like
that's right
people, and I'm like, Jesus, like what? I'm like this girl, what? I'm like that. I'm like, damn, she's crazy. I'm like, what? I don't know.
She is you're right, because she's, I mean, look, Ned Campbell's a beautiful woman. There's no doubt about that. And I imagine she was the popular girl at school. Who knows? But I mean, I think the fact that, well, she's smart, and that's her whole thing. Well, that makes the fact that you're smart means that you can't be popular. But I do like that. Like you really showcase the cruelty. That school is filled with shitty kids. Because you have the people like running around in the Ghostface costume after the poor Drew Barrymore got gutted and hanged from that tree, acting like assholes. And then you have those horrible the cheerleader, and I think the other girl was Skeet Ulrich's girlfriend at the time.
That's how you know it's a movie high school, because everybody's just so mean and hurtful. Like the whole Ghostface thing, you would have gotten expelled for that shit in real life.
Fair, that happens. Henry Winkler does expel those two kids. But I mean, listen, high school's cruel, and children are cruel, and they don't have a sense of morality. I mean, a lot of these kids are assholes, with the exception of, well, some of the main cast members. Like
we talk about Henry Winkler, how just like damn, how he was brutally murdered. Like damn, what did poor Henry Winkler do to you? I'm thinking of a little scene from Little Nicky now, where it's like, Mr. Henry Winkler, covered in bees.
We could talk about Henry Winkler for a second. I think, if there's any other thoughts.
The movie. Honestly, it's like, no, the principal he's a bit of a douche.
If there's
no
any
more happy days.
Yeah, no. I love that they made the Fonz the principal of the school. I thought that was very funny. But if there's any other thoughts on Sydney, go ahead and speak up. But I will say we could talk about it. I didn't have it written down, but there's a lot of characters in this movie, and sometimes they're only in there for a couple scenes. But I do want to mention Henry Winkler, because I think, again, that was Wes Craven going, wouldn't it be funny if we just cast the Fonz as the principal? Like, would he be like he's the cool kid in school, and he ends up being like the big fucking square of the entire school, which I love that. But
his death sets off the final act of the film, basically.
That's
when
right.
Everybody leaves in.
It sets it up, and I like his performance because it's so fucking weird. Because at first he's super handsy with Ned Campbell for some reason.
Please, Sydney, it's so weird.
Like I feel like he does care. Like he really does care about keeping these kids protected, especially Sydney. But I'm like, all right, dude, don't fucking touch her face. And then when he's threatening the students with the scissors at that one point, and he's so over the top. And then, well, of course, when he famously meets, Wes Craven, one of the greatest one of the greatest cameos, I think, of all time, with him as Freddy Krueger, as the janitor in the school. I thought it was great. And of course, his death scene was added last minute because Wes Craven decided that we need to kill more people in the movie. And his was like, oh, let's kill the principal and eliminate his as a suspect. But yeah, general thoughts. Any other thoughts on Sydney, and maybe your thoughts on Henry Winkler as principal? What's his name again? Himbry. Thank you.
It's a good take on a Halloween where you have the older actor. You have to have like one veteran actor, which that was Donald Pleasance, and I guess Donald Pleasance. He's one of the things he's known for playing Blofeld, and this one he's kind of playing. I guess one of the heroes of the movie, and this is kind of even somewhat of a take on that. I would always say is Henry Winkler's like he's known for being the Fonz, he's known for being a greaser. Now he's just the boring principal of the school.
Yeah, no, agreed. That's what I love about it. Any other thoughts on either Sydney or Henry Winkler? Excuse me. His
would
role
have been funny if they stuck a Happy Days reference in there, just like right before he's killed, like played Happy Days, just right where they sneak up on him.
I could have seen them doing something like that. It would have been funny. Because this film has a very popular soundtrack.
My favorite part about Winkler's role in this is like when he was the scene before he got to see before he was like, you little shits, and then he saw Wes Craven, is when he puts on the mask and he acts like
Oh.
he's scared, like he's in the
Yes.
mirror, like oh, but that he keeps on scaring himself like
That's right.
2 or 3 times. And I'm like, why do you keep on scaring yourself? What's going on there?
I love that. I think he scares himself twice by accident.
Well, he scares himself when he turns around with the Ghostface mask, and then he scares himself just randomly out of nowhere. Like,
Yeah,
but it was,
when he walks
funny.
back and he sees his reflection again.
Yeah,
No, it's great. Oh, he lost Stefan. I was gonna ask Stefan. I was gonna ask Ducking Henry his opinion on Scream, but maybe he'll come back in here in a second. But yeah. Any other thoughts before we move on to some of the other characters on either Sydney or I'm just gonna call him the Fonz.
That's okay.
Henry Winkler.
That's fine.
Principal Hembry.
Principal Fonz.
Yes,
Going back to Sydney, I would say like the older I've gotten, the more relatable I've found her, at least like the fact that although she's a strong character, like in the first movie as a teenager, she's still susceptible in a very understandable way to Billy's bullshit in ways that I think a lot of young women have been. Like everyone has that ex-boyfriend who was constantly gaslighting them and being like, okay, I know you're going through a thing right now, but when am I going to get laid?
Yeah.
Yep.
And all that shit. And he just, that back and forth in the hallway and when he crawls through a window and everything, like back then it was like so much easier for guys to get away with that shit. And as time goes on, it's just more and more Me Too-ish. And I think Ned Campbell portrays that vulnerability really well.
I agree with you. I think that's why he gets away with it for so long. Well, because he's handsome. That's why. Because he's the bad boy. He's the pretty boy. He's the one that all the girls. There's even
Not
other
an
scenes.
excuse. That's never been an excuse.
It's not an excuse. But I think that's why. But we're so accustomed to seeing that in a lot of movies, or that happens. I think in real life, where the people he gets off because he is this or because he is handsome instead of like the ugly guy. Of course, the ugly guy would be treated as the villain right off the bat, but not the handsome guy.
It was the 90s, too.
And it was the 90s, yeah, which was chock full of those toxic relationships. They were showcasing those on TV all the time. Yeah, no, again, actually, that's a great jumping off point because the next character I want to talk about was Billy Skeet Ulrich's Billy Loomis, who was one of the villains, one of the 2 major villains in the film. And I even like his, because people have been bringing up like, oh yeah, it's obvious that he's Ghostface, along with Stu, Matthew Lillard's Stu, because his first scene, the only way that he is able to like talk on an emotional level to Sydney is constantly referencing movies. Like his first scene is like, yeah, I was watching The Exorcist tonight, and it was the TV version. It was edited, and they took out all the bad stuff, and it was just it made me thinking, like our relationship. It's one of my favorite scenes in the movie. One of my favorite pieces of dialogue, where it's like, back in the day before the event, our relationship was a steady, R rating, kind of dipping our toes into NC-17. But now it's just made for television, or edited for television. And I'm like, oh yeah, he's the killer. Because he's constantly referencing. He's making all these references all the time. That's the only way he can relate to human emotion is by talking about all of these movies that he's seeing. But I love his performance. I love how menacing he is, how toxic he is, how he's... I mean, especially when he's just like, he's so horny. That's what he is. He's evil.
He's so
and horny throughout this movie. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but yeah, in this scene, and he's dry humping, poor Sydney, and she's like, I'm having none of it. But I really like his performance and like his reveal, and then of course one of my favorite other scenes in the kitchen scene when he reveals everything else about why him and Stu are doing these things. It's great. If I had to pick who is my favorite Ghostfaces in the franchise, I think he's still number 1 for me. I think he's just really, really good. And I love how he played the long game with everyone to that big reveal. But what's everyone's overall impressions of Billy Loomis, Skeet Ulrich's performance?
Creepy.
Very manipulating.
Yeah. To me, he's creepy.
Yes.
But it works. And I was watching an interview. I watch a lot of interviews. And he said that he was just focused on trying to be like a serial killer, like act like one, like get that mentality in his head. So like you could tell like in those scenes, like he was being very creepy. But
Right.
my favorite like moment from him was when towards the end, when Randy's like, "Oh, they're going crazy and stuff," and he just turns around and he quotes Norman Bates, "We all go a little crazy sometimes," and then shoots him. Like, oh my god, that delivery was so perfect.
Yeah, no, agreed. I love that scene. And he's looking so menacing. Any other thoughts on Billy Loomis as a character?
Um,
Austin, do you have something to say?
Yeah, every time you refer to him as Skeeter, all I just think about is Doug's best friend from Doug. And then,
Yeah, I know.
but he does look like fake John, or look, they couldn't get
discount Johnny Depp. Yeah, that's a mean thing to say, but they literally hired him because he had like a Johnny Depp look, and I'm like,
that's why they hired him. So is it really an insult?
Go ahead, Austin.
Oh, but even more so, he's kind of a bit of a hypocrite where he's like, Randy, you're obsessed with these movies, but he's really obsessed with these horror movies.
Yes, he is.
Projecting.
Yeah, it's like he criticizes one guy, but it's not as bad if I do it, if I indulge in it. Very true, because he knows the rules just as well as Randy does in the film. That's a good point. Him and Stu, funny enough. They just kind of play dumb. Or, I mean, Stu plays dumb better. Maybe because he is dumber than Billy.
I think Stu's just dumber.
I think Stu is just dumber. He's like a wannabe Billy. But yeah, Billy's obsessiveness, I think, is just out there a little bit. Like, Stu is very much a follower.
You could see sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, you're good. Go ahead.
You could see the differences and how they killed too, because Billy, he was more precise and whatnot, and Stu, like, you can kind of tell when it was Stu because he was clumsier and he fucked up more, especially when he's tripping over shit.
Yeah, Stu was more the stabby stab, and Billy was always the kind of slicey slice.
Yeah,
it's interesting because I know there's a video online where, for all the movies, where people they know which person is Ghostface in that scene, so they know who Billy is, they know who Stu is, or they know who Mrs. Loomis is, for Scream 2 or Timothy Olyphant. And I don't know who's who. I feel like maybe I can kind of guess certain scenes, But if you can tell just by the way they're acting, that's amazing to me. I would love, because I know there's a breakdown. I'm sure in the script they had it to, or at least the certain people knew at the time who was each Ghostface.
Actually, they didn't know who was who when they were.
Oh, they didn't know by the time when they were doing the movie. Interesting.
No, the one thing I will say about who killed who is, you remember the part when Billy was on top of Sid, and she had like put her finger into his bullet wound, right?
Oh no, his umbrella hole.
Oh yeah. And he had lifted his arm up, holding the knife, about to stab her. Yeah. Literally like the way, like the first scene.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Okay. Yeah.
So that's like the only one that hopefully people caught. That is obvious.
That's a good one. No, that makes sense. So then you can tell, by how they stab. All right, that's fair enough. How they murder people. Interesting. Any other thoughts on Billy before we move on to? Well, obviously, I feel like it's only appropriate to talk about Stu next. But
his reasons for revenge are shitty. I don't care if your dad boinked your girlfriend's mom or whatever the fuck. That's not a reason to kill people. His motivations always sucked.
I'm glad you brought up the motivation, because even the movie, he says, "What does motivations matter? Isn't it more terrifying not to know?" Which I guess in hindsight it is.
Yeah. Still a petty bitch at the end of the day.
Yeah. No, I kind of love that. Where they already, and I think that's how they get away with it, because it's like, oh, really? Just because your mom? But at the same time, mom left him, and he felt neglect, and I was like, all right, I get it, but it's still the same. It's like that's all it was. But all of this to kill everybody else. It's that movie. It's that type of movie logic to me or like that horror movie logic where we know it's dumb, but we're saying it's dumb in the movie. And so I'm like, all right, you can get away with that. I'll allow it. I'll allow you to get away with that. So it doesn't bother me too much, but I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying.
They were looking for an excuse just to kill people. I mean, like
Yes.
the whole thing with his mom was just the catalyst that kind of pushed him over the edge.
That's a good point.
But kind of, I know you guys were mentioning how it's so obvious that Billy and Sue were the killers, but like we say that now when we have like 20 years of hindsight.
True.
Like because in the movie they go out of their way to try to make you second guess who the killer is, because like going into it, we don't know there's two. So there's scenes that are purposely set up to show that, hey, Billy's not the killer. How could he be the killer?
Yeah. When they kill him, when they faux kill him, it's like,
Yeah.
oh shit.
Whole thing when he had the mask and knife fall out of his pocket. I think he did that on purpose to.
It was the cell phone.
Even in that scene, it was impossible for him.
Sorry, I get Scary Movie mixed up here. God damn it.
Well, even in that scene, it's impossible for him to be the killer because how can he go from being out her door and then in her bedroom window that quickly?
True.
I think it was intentional.
People. Yeah, it was a way to literally throw the police off. So, like, I mean, we have the hindsight of that. We know that what happened to the movie, but like, we also talk about how Billy's talking about movies and stuff like that. But so does Jamie Candy's character, Randy. He does it too. So does Stu.
Randy's not creepy though.
I mean,
he is a little.
He's a little creepy.
Yeah.
He's a little
I mean,
creepy.
if he
That's
turned out to
creepy
be the
to Billy.
killer, would anybody have been surprised?
Yeah. No, you bring up some excellent points. I mean, yeah, it's like it's 25 years later. It's like, of course we know these things, but you're right. I mean, that was again, that's the big appeal of Scream because we don't exactly know. And Stu and Billy and Stu do a good job of covering their tracks. I mean, that was their whole thing. We plan to get away with it at the end. That was their whole shtick. After
Their plan to get away with
One
it.
flaw in their plan.
Yeah.
They start stabbing each other before they finished everyone off.
Which is that was their flaw. That's where they fucked up. And that's like my favorite scene in the movie because it's so funny and over the top and get some really great improv from some of the actors. I want to talk about like favorite scenes at the very end.
Man, I feel a little woozy here.
Yeah, I know. I love it so
I'm
much.
dying, man. I'm
dying, man. Fucking throw it at me, man. Or what the fuck he says.
Oh wait, no, the woozy lines from Scary Movie. Again, I'm getting shit mixed up again.
It happens. Hey, the Scream originally had the name Scary Movie to confuse you even
I
more.
saw Scary Movie first.
Before they changed it to Scream. But I think now it just feels appropriate to talk about Stu. I've always viewed him as he's a Billy wannabe, where he wants to be as cool as Billy, as good looking as Billy, but he's not. He just, it's Matthew Lillard, so he's not as, you could say, handsome man, obviously. He's had much success, but when you've yet to compare the two, like Skeet Ulrich is clearly more handsome than he is, and he has that smoldering look. He's a little more serious, seemingly a little more sensitive, whereas Matthew Lillard's character of Stu is very much
He was like
over
the
the top.
spoiled rich kid, but he still wanted to.
He's the party kid.
Yeah.
He's the party boy. That's exactly what he is. And he's a follower where he wants to be like Billy and when he wants to emulate Billy, and that's why he follows. And he's clearly in love with him. I feel like he's like, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading into it, but the fact that he's just so handsy, and he's a very physical character, but he's always holding Billy. He's like, I remember that one famous
I think
shot.
he wanted to fuck him at the very least.
On the back, I feel like it's like the back of the VHS tape or something, or maybe like promotional stills, or like when the movie had come out, all right, like years after. But it was the one. I always think of the shot where he has his head over Billy's shoulder. He's like touching him like cheek to cheek. I'm like, there's something here, and I don't think Billy feels the same way about Stu. I think Billy definitely resents him, is just using him for the most part. At least that's how I feel personally. But I still think he's a fun character. And vicious, and I love his motivation is just like, I think, again, to my point where he's very much a follower, I just cave into peer pressure, which I really love. But thoughts on Matthew Lillard's performance and the Stu character in general?
I think Stu represents a certain type of like toxic masculinity that's seemingly not as overt or whatever. Like towards the end it is, but he's trying to seem like the sensitive guy. He's like, oh, I'm far too sensitive, while Billy's in the background screaming "fuck you" and all that. Like, yeah. And I don't know, he's like crying all the time, but they're either crocodile tears or he's just being a selfish brat.
Have you ever actually seen Matthew Lillard cry real tears?
That was real. They threw that phone at him for real. That was a real
Oh, that
phone.
was real. Oh,
Yeah.
damn.
You threw me. What's his line? You threw a phone at me, you dick. That's what. It is. Which that was improvised from Matthew Lillard because that was a phone that Skid Ulrich did throw at him. That was
Looked
funny.
like a real phone. It sounded like it hurt. You could hear the or it hit his face.
That whole scene just looks like it hurts. But no, Catsby, you bring up a good point where, yeah, Billy's toxicity, his shittiness is very overt, whereas Stu, his is pathetic, but it's just probably as toxic. And where he's constantly crying, so you almost feel sorry for him to a degree because he's so pathetic. But you know that he's just as vicious as someone like Billy and just as dangerous, just in a different way, perhaps. But it's like, I like that they weren't just the same person. It's like it's just they had very different personalities, and that's what made them work so well as a Ghostface duo, in my opinion. But any other thoughts on Stu's character, Matthew Lillard's performance?
I think Stu was probably. I think he was my least favorite character, but but somehow I loved Matthew Lillard's performance. Like he just made me hate the character even more. Like at times I did chuckle a little bit. Like that whole final scene is like, I'm like chuckling about him getting hit with the phone and all that other shit. But yeah, I love the performance, but I didn't like the character, but it's supposed to.
Yeah, I think you're supposed to not like him because even before, like when you first meet him, he's just like, this guy's obnoxious. He's so fucking obnoxious. I don't even want to be around him. Like, what does Tatum see in this guy?
Yeah.
I think she's just a cover for his attraction to Billy.
I guess that's it. Yeah. I guess that's it. Yeah.
They had no chemistry. It's like, why are y'all together? I don't see it here. You fuck buddies or something? It's like, I don't get it.
I think that's part of it. I think Tatum is she is a promiscuous character, not dumb, but definitely it's like, I fuck, that's what I do, but no hiding that fact. But any other thoughts on Stu?
I just love Matthew Lillard's performance of it. I don't know. I know people are saying he's his least. I think he's probably my favorite, just because how over the
zaniness.
You see why he was cast as Shaggy after this movie, and why all 2000, and why he's probably still playing Shaggy today. And his other thing, which I love that he does, is this is just Matthew Lillard as a person. His business is he makes high-end D&D products.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I learned that he's been D&D for like 25 years or so. It's just like, I was like, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
that's
but
great.
Just, he does all that like crazy. He makes like $100 boxes, but they're like filled with a lot of just books and like actual physical stuff. But I don't know, something about his performance, and I also really like his conversation with Jamie Kennedy at the movie store, and the like times they're talking like. There is a friendship there, and there's and Jamie Kenner's explaining the things, and then you see kind of Billy kind of come in, and then the dynamic of them changing.
You're right. Yeah, when Billy enters the picture, that's when Stu becomes far more aggressive towards Jamie Kennedy's character. Whereas, he's kind of has a rapport with Randy. Like maybe they gave each other a lot of shit. More of it coming from Stu than from Randy, but you're right. But as soon as Billy enters, then oh boy, Billy's the apple of Stu's eye. So that's a good point that you bring that up. Moving on from Stu, unless anyone has any other things they want to talk about. Go ahead, Deadpool.
I want to bring something up.
Sure.
Like the first two killings of Drew Barrymore's character and her boyfriend,
right,
were directly linked to Stu.
True.
No, because they even bring up to how she dumped Stu for that guy.
That's right.
So if anything,
it sets up the connection.
If anything, it's him getting payback.
Maybe
that was kind of what Billy did to push him into this, to get revenge against being scorned like that.
It's a great connection because it's like a piece of dialogue when we're first introduced to Stu. When it's like, didn't you date her? He's like, yeah, for a minute. And it's like, okay.
Deflecting.
And the whole thing about, like you said, the dumping. I think even Randy might have, didn't she dump you? He's like, no, I dumped her. It's like, yeah, okay. So, great point. So, everything makes sense in the movie about why all these people are victims, why they've been chosen by the two Ghostfaces in the film. But, moving on from Stu, it makes sense to talk about his, girlfriend, not girlfriend, victim.
Fuck buddy
possibly.
Tatum. Is that
Fuck
her name
buddy.
in the movie?
Tatum, played by Rose McGowan. Now, I feel like Rose McGowan's character of Tatum is supposed to be in the movie the prototypical, big boob bimbo
I
who
see.
is
Parallels.
sex crazy and
Doesn't own a bra.
and those were her real nipples, by the way. It was a cold night. Those were real. She didn't wear a prosthetic for that. But I don't think she is that. I mean, yes. Do I think she embraces her body? Do I think she's promiscuous? It's like, yeah, I like to fuck. Of course, who doesn't? But I do think she's smart. I do think she's street smart and she's savvy and she's sarcastic. But I would never describe her as a ditz or as a bimbo or anything like that. Like, I think she is competent. I mean, she does fight against Ghostface. Probably wasn't smart to try to go out the cat store. But other than that, I do like her. I like her sassiness. I like her spunk. But thoughts on Rose McGowan's performances, Tatum?
Found her to be like the type of character who, if she were in a movie today, she wouldn't be. She wouldn't play that role of like the blonde character that seems ditzy or whatever. She had this sort of snarky quality that almost reminded me at times of Juno or maybe Darcy from the MCU. And she seemed, I don't know, I just really loved her sense of humor. And I guess back in high school, I didn't appreciate it as much because at times she got too snarky at moments that were a little much even for me, because she was talking about how like, oh, Casey didn't get killed till after 10. You'll be fine, Sid, or something like that. And I didn't really, I don't know. I've come to appreciate her character a lot more now because my sense of humor is kind of right there with her.
No, agreed. And I think that maybe why she might rub people the wrong way. And I'm glad you brought up the snarkiness and who she's snarky to, because she's very snarky to Dewey in the movie. And she's very dismissive of him. And Dewey's just like this Labrador. He's like this dog we don't want. He's like, oh, I mean, yeah, he's a little derpy, but we love him. And I think maybe that's why she might be a little abrasive to some people. But I mean, I do like her. Any other comments on Tatum?
Can I be the helpless cheerleader? Sorry, that's a scary movie. God damn it! It's just gonna be me the whole time.
She does have dialogue like that. She's like, "No, I want to live to the sequel," and he goes, No, Scream 2 for you." Any other thoughts? Yeah, go ahead.
I see, like, because she at certain moments she feels like a generic character, but then there's moments like her clowning around Dewey, and it's like, oh well, that's funny, to be honest. But like, to me, I just feel like she was just there for the looks. Which, listen, she was a beautiful woman at that time. Like, yes. she was my like high school, well, not high school, like middle school crush, because I watched Charmed when I was younger. So like, I don't mind her as much in that movie, but honestly, I do feel like she is a forgettable character.
Okay, that's fair. Any other thoughts on Tatum before we move on to some other members of the cast?
Her scene with Ghostface, plus there's another scene in Scream 2, like the car scene, I think are some of the most frustrating scenes in the movies, just because like in Scream 1 Tam, she is actually winning against Ghostface throughout most. That's
I think she could have survived, honestly.
And she's also in a garage full of weapons. She could easily beat him. She had the upper hand throughout most of the movie.
You just need to break a bottle and just stab him.
Yeah, she did that.
Yeah, so it was just so frustrating that she would go through the cat door, even though she was kicking Ghostface's ass pretty much throughout the movie. And then, of course, in Scream 2, there's a scene where they end the car accident with Ghostface driving. He's unconscious, and they could take the mask off or finish him off, but they choose not to for whatever reason.
Could have snapped his neck right there, and then honestly, that would have been the end of it.
We'll talk about Scream 2 someday. There's a scene where Sydney does go for it at first, but then she honks the horn and scares herself. She's like, "All right, fuck, I'm just gonna get out." But she was going to. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying.
Can I add on something with Tatum? Because this always bothered me, because I watched 1 and 2 today. That like she died in that first movie. Yes. And in that second movie, there's no real like talk about Tatum. Dewey doesn't say her name and stuff, and that always bothered me because like you could like in that second movie he's like limping and stuff.
He's
but
fucked up. Yeah, he has a lot of injuries.
But he doesn't make reference to Tatum. Like none of the characters do.
I do kind of mention her in 3 because there's a scene where Patrick Warburton, who's like a bodyguard, is talking on the phone to he thinks is Dewey, and he mentions like, "Oh yeah, we don't want him getting all sliced and diced like your little sister." And then what we think is Dewey is like, "What the fuck did you just say?" And then it turns out like, "Oh, it's not Dewey, it's the killer mimicking Dewey's voice," and then he kills Patrick Warburton. But that's about it, and it doesn't really mean anything because it's not Dewey's not actually in that scene. So yeah, you got a point there.
The only thing I can think of, for the other characters, like I don't know, they didn't mention her. But the only reason I could think for Dewey not mentioning her is I get the sense they don't have a very good relationship, and the fact that she is so dismissive of him. I mean, in every scene that they're in, like she calls him doofus, like constantly. He's like, can you call me, by my officer name? Can you just call me, deputy when we're at work? She goes, no, doofus, and that's the only thing. He's like, I'm glad she's done. That's the only thing I can think of.
They're the reverse of the younger sibling, older sibling trope, where the older sibling bullies the younger sibling. Instead, it's the total reverse, and she thinks he's just a complete piece of crap. It's like, why do you hate your brother so much?
Exactly. It's like when mom said to call me deputy.
That's right. That's right.
We should just move on to Dewey next, honestly.
That's what I was gonna do because I was gonna go to Randy, but we can save Randy for last. Let's talk about Dewey. I mean, as I refer to him, he's the Labrador, the golden retriever of this series. He's this adorable dog who seemingly is dim-witted, but at the same time, he tries his best. He is competent. He's just outdone by people who have a better grasp of the situation than he is. But he's actually surprisingly good at his job. It's just David Arquette. He plays the character of Dewey. I think that's kind of how he is in real life too. Have you ever seen him in interviews? It's like, oh my god, you are this character. Where he's just he has this awkwardness about him. He's like, oh yeah, I don't know, maybe because of the drug abuse, but yeah, I mean, It might be. I don't know, it might be. But it's charming, and I think that's also the big reason why Wes Craven chose to keep the character. He's supposed to die in this movie. Like when he gets stabbed in the back, he died there. But because he knew that everyone got a sense, like everyone loves his character, they filmed that last sequence of him at the very, very end, and that tested well for Tusson. He's like, okay, he's gonna survive. But I have an affection for Dewey and his ridiculous little mustache, which is it's like it felt like a kid who's trying to grow facial hair. And usually it's like really awkward, doesn't look good, but he can grow facial hair, but he chooses to make this little thin, almost like Gomez, like not sexy mustache in any regard. And there's just something about that is like, oh man, you're charming, Dewey. I like you. But thoughts on David Arquette's performance as Dewey?
I can't see anybody else but him in that role. Honestly, it was just like he was perfectly cast. Him and Courtney Cox's chemistry was also believable too. It was like that helps because I think they were married in real life at the time. Well, I don't think they're married anymore, but they were definitely together.
They were married for a while. Yeah, I think so.
Honestly, I thought. I mean, they could have killed him off in the first one, but it's just like you'd be missing that dynamic that he has with Sydney and whatnot. Because I think they've got like a kind of like older, like younger sibling vibe going on there. He's protective of her.
Brother-sister relation they had with his
better your relationship with this girl than your actual sister,
especially in 2. Any other thoughts on Dewey?
Dewey. You go ahead, Jacob.
Okay. Personally, he is my favorite character throughout the whole series. Like you said, he is charming, and he has that charisma that I really like, and like his like chemistry with Courtney Cox in the movie is magnificent in my opinion. So
yeah, No, I like I buy their chemistry. It's especially because like these are two characters you think would not be together. I mean, she is very much this hard-nosed, no nonsense, cruel reporter, and he's just this adorable kind of slow guy. This sweet man. And you're like, that's the one thing I'm like, I don't get it, but I guess they just have. I mean, they're both two very pretty people, and so I think maybe there's just that attraction. Like we're both hot, so let's go at it. Let's be like all these kids. Any other thoughts on David Arquette's performance as Dewey?
Dewey's the kind of character who, in any other movie, might get on my nerves because he's such a bumbler, and the situation that's going on is so dire that it's like, God, why are we following this guy around? We need to follow a smart person. But the way David Arquette plays it, you're right. He's got that charm, and it's like, all right, he's maybe not the brightest, but he does have his heart in the right place, and he does try. And I'm glad that they reversed the decision to kill him off so that he could come back with a limp that keeps changing in every movie. Like in the second movie, it's in his right hand. In the third movie, it's in his left hand. In the fourth movie,
in the back. They make it sound like he had a stroke.
Yeah, and then in the fourth movie, the limp is just completely gone, and now in the new movie, they're apparently bringing it back. It's like, guys, pick one. Does he have a limp or not? And which arm does it affect?
I think that's a funny gag. I kind of like that it's moving around
inconsistent.
at this point. It's very consistent. I think that's part of. I think they're doing that on purpose. I think that's kind of like. Hey,
so?
Does he have a limp in the movie?
I think it definitely that's what they're doing. They don't want to we're just being goofy. I feel like goofy for Dewey.
I do feel like because you talked about the reversal of his death, I feel like in the new movie he is gonna end up dying, in my opinion.
They're gonna kill.
They're finally just gonna take him. Like we're done. Bye.
He looks like a sad dad in the new trailer, so. I could definitely just live because clearly I get the sense him and Gail are no longer together based on what I saw because like the place he's living at, it's like but we'll see. We'll inevitably see. And we're talking about Gail. Unless anyone. Oh, by the way, Stefan, Duck and Henry, welcome to stream. We're just going on about Scream right now. You know what? I think it'll be good. We're already pretty much through the halfway point talking about characters, and at this point we're gonna cover maybe two more people and then Ghostface and talk about our favorite moments before wrapping up. But I do want to give you a chance to express your opinions on Scream. When did you first see it, and how's your opinion changed over time?
Yeah, so my first time seeing Scream was actually when I was a youngin'. I was around 7, and I was not ready. So it definitely turned me off to horror movies for much of my young life, and I was like, "Oh no, I can't do this. I can't watch people get killed like this. No, not like this." And I was not ready for it. The next time I watched it, I was 15, and definitely a lot more receptive to it. And I finally was able to understand like so much of like, oh my god, this is actually great.
Nice. No, very cool, very cool. And of course you can chime in when we talk about any of the other characters. We just finished talking about Dewey, David Arquette's character, and now we're going to be moving on to the apple of his eye, Gail, who is, I think, for a lot of people, I can see it, that being their least favorite character. But again, I think Courtney Cox is doing a good job where she's playing that reporter who gets under your skin, who's kind of shitty, who's kind of in it for herself. At the end of the day, maybe she does have a bit of a heart, but she's like, I'm gonna make a fucking buck off of this. I'm going to make money off of this story. That's her thing. But I think she does a good job playing a sleazy tabloid journalist.
She'd fit right in on social media today if she were a real person.
Yeah, totally. But anyone's other thoughts on like the Gail Weathers character?
I really love how Courtney Cox finds that balance between like how ruthless Gail is, but also the moments like her softer side and the fact that she does seem believably attracted to Dewey, because that's what really keeps you from hating her completely, because there are times when she is kind of manipulating him, but it's just because her career and everything else, her desperation to be taken seriously is just always at the front of her mind. So it's like a compulsion, it seems more like. So she's still able to be sympathetic.
I agree with you. I do like I mean, she does have those redeeming moments as well. Like, because I understand why she's. I mean, I think we all do in our lives. We have this.
I can relate to Gail a whole lot more now as an adult than I did when I was a kid.
Sure, yeah, because she's the older person, and she's like, well, she's just interfering in either our fun or our lives, and that's what adults do. But like, yeah, as we get older, like, yeah, I understand. Like, she's climbing that fucking ladder, and she wants to be able to put her name out there and get the money she wants, and get the position she wants, the respect that she wants, and she feels like she has to cut a few of these corners when it comes to morality or something like that. But at the end of the day, she does the right thing, which I think is really cool. And you can also see, because she does the right thing, why she'd be attracted to someone like you. I think she maybe even admires him. The fact that he is so goddamn earnest, and she's like, holy shit, there are just like really good, wholesome people out there. So I think it's not only just because it's David Arquette and he's a beautiful man, especially in this movie, but because no, you're just a really good person. And so I think that's why we also buy into that relationship. And even as it continues on into the franchise, at least the movies that I've seen. Any other thoughts on Gail before we move on to probably like the last main character who's not Ghostface in the movie?
I have thoughts, and I'd love to hear your guys' feelings on this regarding Gail, because I rewatched all the movies recently after the trailer for the new one dropped, because it put me in that mood. And rewatching the first one and seeing how it ends, specifically with Gail, I was like, I don't feel like, if I was watching this like for the first time and there were no sequels coming out, I would walk away from this feeling like, I don't know if Gail's been fully redeemed yet. Like, she needs to go through more in order to like atone for being so bitchy before. And I feel like that's part of why the second one is so necessary, because I feel like that sort of completes her arc of like going from this reporter who only cares about the money and fame to, no, yeah, I really do care about these friends that I've made along the way. Like, so I feel like the sequel is important for that. And I also feel like it's important in terms of Billy and seeing, because we never find out what the deal was with his mom and how she would probably take all this. And I feel like what they do with her in the second movie is another reason why there needed to be a sequel.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, because even in the sequel, like, we see that Gail capitalized and everything from the first movie, but she still makes the right calls at the very end of Scream 2, and I mean, she apologizes to a number of the characters, and so I can definitely see that. I agree with that, and I like that. I mean, I love the fact that they're like, oh, let's go into more in regards to Billy's mother. And bringing in Laurie Metcalf and Jackie, which I thought was great. She has those big fucking eyes, just like I was like, yep, that's Billy's mother. Got those big eyes that don't blink. I love that. I thought that was very funny. Very well casted.
What does Sydney say? Because Gail didn't recognize her, but Sydney
got
said
work done or something.
Yeah, it's called a makeover, honey.
She lost 60 pounds and a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. And she's called a makeover, honey. You should try it. I like that one. But now we'll move on to the last character of
Randy,
which is a fan favorite, I think, for a lot of people, and that's because he is very much the audience avatar to a degree. He is the most meta character. I mean, he's the one that explains the rules to a horror film, or at least a lot of the tropes and how to define them, how to defy them, how to protect yourself from being killed by the killer. Even though this is a movie where they break the rules constantly, but I think it's also elevated by Jamie Kennedy's performance, and I felt like, I mean, I think this is probably his best role, his most iconic role, and I mean, he is that movie geek that either we are, or that we know, that can be either overzealous or obsessive, but it feels earnest. It feels completely earnest. And he does have a number of scenes which are really funny. And he's, for me, he's like the guy. It's like, yeah, this is the person that should be with Sydney at the end of the day. He seems like a better person than anyone else, certainly of any of the other male characters in the movie. And so I've always had a great affection for Randy, and he's in some of my absolute favorite scenes in the film. But any other opinions on Randy and Jamie Kennedy's performance in the movie?
I just love that he was able to make such an impression, considering that, like, in the first movie, looking back on it, he played a bigger role in the second half than the first half. And it's kind of surprising to look back and realize that. And also, I do wish that he would have had his chance with Sydney, because I remember the part where she's talking on the phone to who she thinks is him, and she's being kind of flirty.
Yeah.
And it just makes me think, damn, why didn't that happen?
It's that's a great point. Even you can see that Randy I don't want to delve too much in the second one, but when she's with her new boyfriend Jerry O'Connell and he sees them together, you can see how disappointed he is and how he wants that. But he doesn't get involved. What I also appreciate about Randy, he doesn't get involved, doesn't stick himself in the middle. You know, he's like, all right, she's with him. So he's not being like, I'm going to manipulate the situation for myself. And so I kind of, again, he is that wholesome, despite sometimes being overzealous, over-exaggerated. Like, I do think he has a good moral core to him, which makes him...
Randy is a true friend.
He's a true friend, yeah. I mean, he is. And and it's the whole thing, well, the nerd will never get with the hero character, the heroine of the horror movie, at least most of the time. And I mean, he provided he is the deconstructionist of the movie. Like, I love that he put it out there for everyone about the rules to this entire movie.
And he figured it out from the start, too.
And he figured out
Billy was the killer.
In each movie, he figures out who the killer. That's why they took him off the board in the second one, because like, okay, he can't be here because he's going to keep guessing all the killers at this point. Well, which I really love that. And he talks about the sequel, what you do for a sequel eventually later on. But any other thoughts on Randy as a character and Jamie Kenney's performance?
Just that, like, I can kind of see little moments here and there where, like, I can see why some people thought he was suspicious, because the way he would talk about some movie tropes, or he'd get frustrated or something, and then all of a sudden his voice would be raising. Like, he was, when I said earlier he's a little bit creepy, it's in a way that's harmless, but of course all the cool kids don't think he's harmless, but they're completely oblivious to the fact that Billy, he seems cool, quote unquote, but he's the real creeper.
Because Billy's handsome. He's classically handsome. That's why he gets away with it.
Yeah, Randy's a nerd who loves movies a little too much. He's creepy. Just like that whole trope.
No, it's good. Both of you bring up a good point in regards to Randy. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I will say, though I will try to be candid about too, he does provide the biggest clue of who the killer is in that movie, beyond just actually saying it.
Yeah, he actually
picks
it up. Well,
he's
what he's
horny.
Talking about.
Oh, you mean in regards to like Billy is just horny, and that's what it is? Yeah. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think he predicts the motivations very well in the film. But moving on from Randy, unless anyone has any more thoughts, and you can say your piece about Randy as a character in general. But I did want to talk about the villains of the movie. I mean, we were talking about Billy and Stu, but I guess this is just Ghostface in general. You know how it's interesting in a horror franchise. Most horror franchises, I said at the top, it's always the same person: Jason, Michael, Freddy, that kind of thing. But I like that Ghostface is always someone different. However, there is a certain aesthetic that they always adhere to of Ghostface, which is that cheap ass looking, black rag costume, monk costume, and that mask. But to me, it's effective at the same time, where it's scary, but it's also goofy at the same, as well. And it works. They go hand in hand with each other. And I really dig it. And I think the thing that is the consistent element to Ghostface that has worked across all the movies is Roger Jackson's voice. Hello, Sydney. Like, that's the thing.
Is that his actual voice?
Yeah, that's Roger Jackson. Yeah. Who has voiced Ghostface on the phone in every movie, and he's doing it again most recently. I think those three elements: the cheap ass Halloween costume, the mask, and that voice, is what has made Ghostface as an iconic killer, where he stands next to people like Jason or Michael Myers or Freddy Krueger. But any thoughts on Ghostface, just the aesthetic? Did you like it? Do you not like it? I know some people may not like the way the suit looks, so you feel like it's not intimidating, but any thoughts on that?
I love the voice more so than the outfit, because the outfit's just like, it's kind of it's kind of forgettable. Honestly, you can go buy that costume at Walmart for like $10. The whole getup if you wanted to.
Cheap.
The voice, I think the voice is what really makes Ghostface for me, more so than anything.
Before we see him, we hear him.
Yep.
And he calls Drew Barrymore.
For me, I love everything about Ghostface. It's the mask, it's the costume, it's the voice, it's like, as you said, he is the icon. Like, and it's funny because like now when you see Ghostface, like anybody could pick up that mask, and that's like easy money for the company who officially owns Ghostface, which is Fun World, I think. And like before that, he was just called, what was it, the peanut-eyed ghost mask, and now like he has that official name as Ghostface. Is like, yeah, he's
as seen in Scream. Yeah,
as seen in Scream, he's literally up there with any other masked killer. So to me, it's iconic. It's legendary. And it's impactful.
Any other thoughts on from anyone else in regards to Ghostface, the design, the voice?
I think even as a kid, I was like, "What? He's the voice of Mojo Jojo from Powerpuff."
Oh, yeah.
I think that was one of the most shocking things finding out later. Just because Mojo is such a weird voice, and then you hear Ghostface, it has like such a deep and scary. It is almost scary too.
Mojo Jojo. Yeah, I mean, it's a different cadence. It doesn't sound like, hello, Sydney. Do you like scary movies? It doesn't sound like Mojo Jojo at all. Yeah, which is what makes him just talented voice actor.
No, Mojo Jojo sounds like a Bond villain ranting. I think it's just funny to me. I am Mojo Jojo. Yeah.
I really like Ghostface. I like the fact that the costume is pretty much anyone can make it, and I think that's one of the reasons. That's why I like it, because it's so realistic. There's no like supernatural things, like when he's like falling around, like when he's like tripping over shit and getting kicked in the balls and shit like that. I think that brings, I don't know, I feel like I connect to that more rather than Jason just like teleporting everywhere, or Freddy going into your dreams. So I really like Ghostface.
Yeah, I think it's part of his charm. It's just like, he's not all powerful. Like,
no,
it's just
he's not omnipotent.
It's some guy in a suit. It's some schmuck, guy or girl. It could be anyone, and you can defeat them. You can beat them back. It's not like Michael Myers, Jason. As soon as you kind of like, oh, you're fucked. Like, if you can't run, then it's over for you. And so I like that you can fight back against them, which I think which is really cool. And I think it also makes it funny as well. Like, again, I love when he's fucking flailing around when he's chasing someone. And I like how over exaggerated, because that's some of the humor comes in. Is in those sequences.
I think that mask is something that Stu would have picked out. It has that goofiness to it.
Like that ton. He's like, if I only had a ton, then he would have been even loved it even more. But you're right. I would not be surprised where Billy would go for something more scary or sexy looking. But yeah, Stu would be like, nah, this looks goofy. Let's go.
Picture how that whole scene went down. They walked into a Dollar Tree like, oh shit, here we go. We got our mask, man.
Exactly. Yeah. I could. Oh my god. Yeah, that's a deleted scene. That's a behind the scene. The origin. They do a Scream origin. They get younger actors to play them. I could totally see them doing that. Yeah, nice. No, cool. I'm glad. I like that we have a bit of a diverse opinion in regards to the look of Ghostface, because there is some people are definitely split on the look of the character.
You know what's funny about Ghostface is like, even people who've never seen Scream knows who Ghostface is, because that the mask is like, oh look, it's a ghost mask. I might as well wear it. It's that type of thing.
Well, it's funny because the mask was already around before the, you brought it up. Yeah. It was before, Scream had already come out. But now it's just, people just know it. People just know it because it's been in pop culture for 25 fucking years since this movie came out, which is great. It's 25th anniversary is this year.
Yep.
I guess it's coming up in December, I want to say, which is on the eve of the release of the fifth one. So that's pretty cool to me.
Do they ever? Sorry, I was going to ask a question.
No, go ahead.
do they ever mention why they chose this? Because you were saying that it was around beforehand, and I'd never seen the mask or anything. But did they ever go into like why they chose this over like another mask or anything?
So the story with the mask is, I talked about this in the commentary, I believe, where they were actually doing scouting locations, and they found the mask, and like this grandmother, or this mother owned this home, and her kids already moved out, but they like somewhat like the scouting people, they went up to one of the son's room to look for I think it was for like Tatum's house or something, and they went in there and they saw that mask, and they said, oh, that's something we've been looking for, because in the script, in Kevin Williamson's script, it's only described as a ghost-like mask, a all-white face, kind of like definitely like referencing something like probably like Michael Myers or something, but there was never like a really deep description of it. And they're like, oh, let's use something like this, because couldn't use that because already copyrighted, like Dimensions or the Weinsteins, they didn't have the copyright. And so Wes Craven went, all right, well, let's try to create something that's close to it, because they just liked it. They just thought that was, that's kind of what we're looking for, a ghost-like mask. But then you could find like all of their prototypes, but they just didn't. It just didn't look good enough. It didn't look as good as what that original mask. And so eventually they said, all right, well, we'll just buy it from the owners, and they have. And I think that I forget the owners. Like it's some company. I think it's somewhere in the American Northeast, and they eventually. Yeah, that's it. And they've made a lot of money off of it, and they've always, like, as seen in Scream, Ghostface as isn't in Scream. That's how they've marketed since then. But famously, they didn't. So the Weinsteins or Dimensions, they didn't actually buy the copyright soon enough, and Wes Craven was already filming the movie with the mask anyway, which is a big fucking no-no. Like funny enough, the first thing they shot was the beginning portion of the movie with Drew Barrymore for 5 days. That entire sequence, that 10-minute sequence, took 5 days to shoot, and they shot all that, and then eventually they got the word that, all right, we bought it. And he's like, good, because I'm already filming with it. Which I think is just so fucking funny to me. A big project like this. But yeah, that's the story behind the mask. I think is pretty fun. But
cool.
Moving on, kind of wrapping up now. Talking about just legacy of the film, that kind of thing, and impact on the genre. But in particular, like talking about the scenes that really appeal to us, that we truly love. I mean, there's a lot. I think a lot of us have these in common. But for me, if I had to pick one scene in the movie, because there's so many great sequences here, but I love that ending scene with Billy and Stu revealing that they are in fact the Ghostface killers and why they did all this. And I just love the acting and just the monologue that Billy and Stu are giving to Sydney, and seeing her reaction, and just how goofy it is when they decide to, like, all right, before we wrap this whole thing up, because they think they're going to get away with it at this point, that's the setup. We're going to live on to the sequel, because even Stu says, we're going to do a sequel, baby. They start stabbing the shit out of each other. And I like to have a little argument where Stu like stabs Billy, and Billy's like, give me the knife back. Give me the knife. He's like, no, because he knows that if he gives Billy the knife, he's going to stab him again. And he gives him, of course, he fucking stabs. Like that point, it's like, oh, you fucked up. By keeping stabbing each other, they're losing blood until Stu's like bleeding out. They stabbed me too much, man. Like all that shit is just really amusing to me. But I mean, there's so many great scenes, but that is definitely my favorite in the film. Anyone else? Like, we can go down the row. Start with Deadpool. What was your favorite scene in Scream?
That one is my favorite scene as well, and it makes you wonder, like, how did they get away with this for this long?
Yeah,
because clearly they didn't really think the final part through, and it makes me wonder. Like earlier in the movie, there's a scene where Ghostface first attacks Sydney and fails. Makes me wonder, like, were they originally planning on killing her right then and there, and were they trying, or was this final like murder scene? Was this them kind of throwing it together because their initial killing failed?
That's a good point. That's true, yeah, because they did actively try to kill her. One of them, yeah, I guess it was Stu who was running, chasing after her at the time. So I guess yeah, that's a good point. Maybe that's why it feels so haphazard at the end and so bloody and so over the top. Good point. Wow, yeah, you could really just do a deep dive of this movie and dissect it, and just like, oh shit, we got to change our plans now. Moving on from you, Deadpool. Emily, what about you? What's your favorite scene?
I have to say the first kill. Honestly, it's probably my favorite scene of the movie because it's so unexpected. You think, oh, it's Drew Barrymore. She'll survive. No, they end up disemboweling her and hanging her ass from a fucking tree, and boom, roll credits. It's just perfect start to the movie. Love it.
It has an incredibly strong opening. Of any slasher film. I was trying to think, even when I was doing my commentary, like what's I guess the original the original Halloween, where he is tracking his sister in the house and her boyfriend, her one pump chump boyfriend, and going up there and stabbing her. I guess that because it appears as like one shot in the film, even though it's edited. So yeah, it's an incredibly strong opening. What about you, Osnick?
So probably my favorite two is them and stabbing themselves, but I would say that my next one is the Randy giving them the rules while watching Halloween. It's just such a classic, but also I think it's such a great thing if anyone's ever been the movie buff of their friend group or been like, you guys don't understand the tropes of these movies, and you have it to explain to them.
No, that's another great one, and it's just. In case the audience hasn't fucking gotten it yet, it's like this is what the movie's about, because there are some of those dummies who probably just wouldn't know. So no, that's another great scene. What about you, Chris Ayers?
My favorite moment is a very quick one that I forgot was even in the movie until rewatching it a week or two ago, which is when Gail's like trying to drive away, and then Jamie shows up like, "Hey, what's going on?" and she fucking whacks him in the face with the phone.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
I seriously forgot that was in the movie until just recently. It's like, oh, I love this so much.
Because that last 40 minutes of that movie is so goddamn good, and there's so much shit happening. I forgot about that too. Every time I say, "Oh yeah, she fucking beats the shit out of him with the phone." Always at the phones at the end of this movie. That's a great pick. Stefan, what about yourself? What is your favorite scene from this film?
Yeah, I'm kind of basic, where it's similar to yours with the whole them stabbing each other, and just that part where Stu and Billy are on the phone with Sydney, and she's just taunting them, and you just see like Billy's enraged and Stu's just like befuddled and dying. Like, yeah, don't tell my mom; she'll be so upset.
So much trouble.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean that is just because it's just pure chaos in that scene.
Yeah.
What about you, Jacob? What's your favorite scene in the movie?
My favorite scene in the movie is the short cameo appearance of Lev Strut. No, I'm just kidding. That's kind of funny that he's only in there for like 5 seconds. But
yeah, it's not kind of nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, but my favorite scene from the movie is the video store scene. Just Jamie Kennedy basically being him, just screaming from the top of his lungs like, "If they saw prom night," and everybody looking at him, and Stu was like, "Hey, relax over there, like,
sure,
we don't need this type of attention." Like, it shows that he knew who was the killers the whole time, but they also try to like show that, hey, Billy's probably not the killer, but we all know that Billy's the killer, especially with that motive and talk. And I always just gravitate to that scene because of how much it was improvised.
Yeah, it was very funny. Cassie, what about yourself? What's your favorite scene in the movie?
Watching it today, the scene that I was watching for and the one that stuck out was like the closing shot, because I couldn't remember like what note did they exactly end this on, and I noticed in the very last shot it centers on Gail doing the story even after she's survived like this literal massacre and her camera guy is dead and everything. She's delivering the story just like she always does, because she knows this is her big chance, and furthers the theme of like how trauma and disaster sells, just like it's all over the TV throughout the movie and everything. But also I think we can't get through this without mentioning like Jamie Kennedy on the couch saying, "Behind you, Jamie, behind you." That was also iconic.
That was great. It's literally she's saying that Jamie Kennedy is saying that to Jamie Lee Curtis, and it's Sydney and Kenny are saying that to Jamie Kennedy, who's saying that to Jamie. Just like, oh my God. Yeah, that is great. I love that scene as well. Sorry, I was just looking at something really quick. But what about you, M. Xavier? To end it, what is your favorite scene in the movie?
I think my favorite scene in the movie was, or one of, because some of my favorites have already been mentioned, but I think one of my favorites is the death scene of Tatum. Partly because there's references to a scary movie in that, like the whole scene where she's like, do I need to be the helpless victim? And it just had me do flashbacks of that movie. But also,
Sure.
it's just I don't know. I just found it funny. I thought it was interesting, and yeah, just thought it was good.
Nice. Well, does anyone have any final thoughts in regards to the film? Go ahead and speak up. I'll just say for myself that like I said, I think this is the defining horror film of the 1990s. It had such an impact. I thought it's cool when we get a movie that really likes to dissect its own tropes and takes the piss out of itself and has fun with it. Doesn't take itself too seriously. I think it's important. For like any major franchise or genre, kind of do a little examination and go like, yeah, we know what this is, and we can have a little fun with the audience, which I think is really cool. And it led to for the most part, a very successful, definitely commercially successful franchise and numerous films that have been influenced by it since then and various knockoffs. But I appreciate Scream and Scream 2 for what they've contributed to film and definitely genre filmmaking. But if everyone has any last minute thoughts they just wanted to add, in case they didn't get to speak on something, go ahead and speak on them before we wrap this up.
For me personally, I've said this to a lot of people. As I said to a lot of people before, Halloween is my first love in horror movies, but Scream is my true love in horror movies, because that movie just made me love the slasher genre even more, with the commentary on the movie, like other movies, and just how self-aware the movie was. So yeah.
Nice. Any other thoughts from anyone else before we wrap up? Good. Okay, well there it is. Episode 5 of Discourse. Say that 10 times fast. Talking about Scream, Wes Craven's 1996 genre defining, dissecting film, which I'm a huge fan of, like many of the people here tonight. So, but I hope you guys who are currently listening enjoyed this, and we'll be sure to see you at the next one. Bye. Bye. You didn't say bye with me, goddammit. You're supposed to say bye with me.